Hello and welcome to this episode of Stories of Hope by Kangaroo Minds. I am Vedika and today we have with us author and founder of Bipolar India, Vijay Nallawala. With the experience of 3 decades as an entrepreneur and with his own lived experience of bipolar disorder, Vijay Nallawala founded Bipolar India as a peer support community pan-India to provide support to people in this space. He uses his knowledge, experiences to help people to feel less alone and more supported in their journeys. He is much sought after as a speaker for several conferences, seminars, and events around mental health. Before we hear more from him on his story, we'd like to put out a trigger warning for our audience today. If at any point during this conversation, should you find yourself feeling triggered or distressed, we urge you to please take a step back and look after yourself. If you need any additional support resources, you can also find them on our website. And now, without taking up much time, I'm going to hand over to Vijay Nallawala to share his story and his learnings and how that's been an inspiration for all the work that he does. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you, and we're looking forward to hearing more about your story and your experiences.
Thank you so much, Vedika. In fact, I was looking forward to this opportunity of taking my story to a large audience, right? And hoping that it will connect with a few of them listening in at least. Yeah. In my journey of 59 years, I live in Mumbai, by the way. Yeah. I'm married. I have a teenage daughter. There have been various highs and lows, in the journey. I think that happens in every person's life, but I think mine would be in the context of what we call normalcy, would be extremes of highs and lows, right? Yeah. So one of the really low lows was in May 2003. When I was initially diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Yeah. Right. So it was a period of a lot of upheaval prior to that, but because of the lack of awareness in those years, our family couldn't place a finger, put a finger to what the problem was, and to grapple with what was happening to me. Right. So it took a lot of turmoil to sort of reach to the conclusion that psychiatric help was needed. Yeah. And I was sitting in front of the psychiatrist, and the diagnosis was that you have manic depressive illness. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that was how bipolar disorder was known as in clinical terms way back then. And by the way, I had, this visit was necessitated because of my extreme mood phase of full-blown mania, which entails very high energy levels, euphoric thoughts, being distanced from reality because I was in a psychotic phase. Yeah, I believed I had superpowers and so on, right? And from the clinic, I had to be shifted directly to hospital. Initially, it didn't even sink into me what was happening to me, and then when reality dawned, that was when that was the crushing moment for me in my life. I'm a person who was a successful entrepreneur. We were running an enterprise for 14 years, and then now everything was there were more question marks than answers that I could see in front of me, right? So it was a sense of being overwhelmed, in short, in all aspects of life. And one often tends to be a victim. So it was very easy to call say that I was also, I can identify myself now in retrospect as a, playing victim in that phase. What did this lead to further in my life? I was talking about my enterprise that I had built up with a lot of hard work and skill and resources. over a period of 14 years. We are in the field of audiovisual equipment rentals, high-end equipment for conferences, events, and so on. And we were among the foremost in Mumbai in our field, right? And somehow I lost the confidence to run the enterprise. All enterprise needs a lot of vigor, a lot of self-belief. It doesn't work otherwise, right? And that mojo had been lost, in short. Yeah. And I said that since I have built up the reputation of all these for 14 years, we had clients of high caliber. We used to do events for entities like Microsoft, the Art of Living, Infosys Technologies. I said, look, I don't want to let them down because of my illness. Right? And one fine day, we just shut it down. So that was a body blow to me, because the enterprise had become a virtual identity, for myself. I associated it. I mean, my personal identity was almost merged with the enterprise, its success and the excellence it stood for. And then shutting down that enterprise meant that there was a huge vacuum. I couldn't relate myself to any other identity. At that juncture, just before that, I had also got married, and there was a lot of strife in my marriage. Understandably so, because for a person to understand what I was going through is very challenging. Even if that happens to be your spouse, it's very challenging for an outsider to really grasp the nuances of a severe mental illness. It's not easy. So with time, I can relate to the kind of doubts and dilemmas my wife must have gone through, in those times. The questions that must have troubled her, just like they were troubling me, about the future she was facing in the relationship. Yeah. So that was another low point. And then there were some pivotal points also, which led to transition. Okay. As I said, the diagnosis was one pivotal point. Yeah. You could call it a low point. But you need to fall down that low to use it as a springboard to even come up again in life. Yeah. So the bigger the challenge a person faces, I believe that sort of creates the environment for greater transformation. There is a possibility of that. From there, how did the recovery journey begin? It began with a sense of belief. It took a lot of time. It begins with acceptance and development of self-awareness about what I was living with, beyond the symptomatic knowledge that we have about all these biomedical conditions, so on and so forth. But it was more about understanding my emotions, my correlation with my mood swings and these aspects. Yeah. So there came a pivotal point in 2008, Vedika. Yeah. That was the first time I developed belief that I would be able to turn around my journey.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is a very crucial point in recovery, because it starts with a mindset that I'm going to get this done. I'll get it behind me. Yeah. Until that sort of confidence and belief comes in, you don't get motivated enough to walk the walk, right? Yeah. So in 2008 from 2003 to 2008, was a period of wilderness, you can say, all the upheavals, and a lot of reading that I used to do about self-help books and personal development books somehow instilled belief in me that, look, there have been people with greater challenges, but with determination and perseverance, one can overcome such challenges. And there was I had a sort of you can say a case study for me to sort of fall back on and be motivated from. By the way, I have been living with severe asthma also since my childhood. So the onset of my bipolar disorder symptoms began in my adolescence when I was 14, and I diagnosed only when I was 40. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was a 26-year gap between onset and diagnosis.
Right.
Yeah. Now look at the flip side. How physical illnesses are easily diagnosed. I'm not saying every time it's spot on, but my asthma also happened at similar time in a similar time frame. So, and it kept on getting worse and worse and more acute until it got life-threatening. Yeah.
Right.
And many doctors had given up hope, and in fact they were discouraging in their communication, that I can't see any other way out for you, and that kind of talk. And somehow I had met a doctor, late Dr. Nifadkar, who again instilled a belief in me. It began with that belief that look, with a holistic approach to healing, you can overcome this. And within 6 months, a decades-old, severe illness had turned around. So I said that if I could get out of that phase, why can't I do it? Repeat the same process for my mental health conditions. Yeah, challenges are a bit different, but I think my discipline can help me overcome these challenges. Yeah, so that was a pivotal point also. Yeah. And what did all this transition lead to? I became more confident about myself, started to socialize more. I think, there was one learning I would like to, bring up here. Before this, I mean, in the period of 2003 and 2008, that 5-year initial period, I had a lot of relationship issues, so very intimate personal relationships, and even percolating to outside in the society, yeah, to extended families, friends, and so on, right? So my exploration and introspection that I used to do in this period made me very, very self-aware, understanding what I was all about, what I expected out of life. Yeah? And I became a very good friend of myself. Yeah? So that equation with myself helped me sort of resolve all my relationships outside in the outside domain. Yeah? So it translates. I think that's a direct correlation. If you are comfortable with your own self, it's easy to sort of build relationships with people. Sure. Yeah, right. It can't happen with emptiness inside, and then you are sort of there is a pretense otherwise, right? That happened. So it led to a lot of enriching of relationships, bonding with family, right? And so my marriage also, which was in doldrums initially, right? We were on the verge of separation on several times. It became a robust relationship, which actually nurtures me, right? So that is also something which is heartening. Yeah. I found an expression in writing and blogging in this period. Yeah. It was around 2011, 2012. I was new to social media back then. But what I realized was it began with microblogging on Facebook and other domains, right? And then I said that I might want to express it in a more formal way. I took to blogging, right? That led to writing my first book, Vedika. So, and the book, writing my book was a cathartic process. It helped heal me, I would say. It was like a lightening of a burden, right? Expressing all my anguish with a genuine, expression was very much a cathartic experience, which helped, and also it made me more self-aware, right? Writing became a tool for understanding myself. And you would agree that writing can be therapeutic as well, right? So this was one of the models which helped me sort of connect to my inner self and sort of help in the healing process. Along with medication and therapy, which was ongoing all these years, I've been very disciplined in those respects. I would say that what helped me in a major way was my, self-care approach. Yeah. So, as such, for asthma, I had adopted a holistic approach, which I was compelled to. You can say I was pushed into doing that. There wasn't much of a choice, given that my so distressing. There wasn't a choice given to me. So sometimes, even these kind of situations where you are pushed into a corner, work in your favor, right? So even although I was much better on the front, on my physical health front, those practices I didn't want to discard because I had started enjoying doing those things. So even today, till this date, my day includes 1 hour of pranayam every morning, a 45-minute vigorous workout at least 5 to 6 days a week, a nutritious diet which is by a certified nutritionist, a sleep hygiene routine which is so relevant for mood disorders. There is a linkage between regularity in sleep patterns and those things. So all these sort of approaches helped me develop resilience, and over a period of time I transited from all these periods of upheaval of moods to a period of what is known as remission. So since the last 5 to 6 years, I'm on minimal medication and I haven't experienced a single mood swing. So a high degree of stability along with low medication. So remission is a extended period of stability.
So I just wanted to ask you, for instance, like when you said that you had an onset of, what was later diagnosed to be bipolar disorder during your adolescent years, and it wasn't until in 2003 that you were able to formally get a diagnosis. So in that period, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like for you? Like what were you going through in terms of your mental health?
Vedika, actually, if you ask me, I was clueless back then. So I was a 14-year-old in my critical 10th boards, and I was in severe depression back then, and I didn't even understand that there was a term known as depression. Forget bipolar disorder or manic depressive illness and all that. So, see, we are talking about the year, this was somewhere around 76, 77. If you go back to that era, with almost zero lack of access to information. Now we are in this era of the internet and Google, and even media outreach is much more. People are sharing their stories, and that is why we connect with these issues. So I don't even blame my family for not realizing what I was going through. So we didn't seek any sort of formal support. And these depressive phases used to last for as long as 6 months, debilitating depression. And now, with all my level of awareness and the knowledge that I have gained over the years, I have, I can spot paranoia, which I was experiencing along with the depression. I used to also experience, psychotic mood phases. So the depression was that severe.
Right.
And of course, phases of hypomania are easy to miss for a person who is not aware, right? So there would have been several such phases. It's easier to recall the highly depressed phases because they were the pain points in the journey, right? Okay. So, and these episodes happened regularly over a period of years. So it was the first one happened during my 10th boards, and then in my 11th, in my first year I was doing commerce in my college. Subsequently, again in college after 2 years, and I'm really surprised how I could clear my exams, and I was a fairly bright student, not very studious in nature, but or dedicated to my studies. But despite my challenges, without any therapeutic support or medication or anything at all, it's amazing how I pulled through those periods. And
Right.
your question about what was my understanding of these issues? My understanding was that I was slowly going mad. That was how damning the experience was for me. All right. To me, it seemed like I was losing, everything was falling apart. It didn't make sense to me at all. So there was zero understanding, only wilderness. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that, comes with the mental health condition, which is that feeling where things are falling apart, but at the same time, you feel extremely alone in what you're going through. And at the same time, let's add in the element of stigma. Stigma, misinformation, and sometimes it could just come from a place where people don't know what to say, or what they say might be extremely unhelpful. So have you experienced, in your entire journey, like are there things which people said to you that, were really helpful or not helpful as well?
I would say most of these issues that I faced were in the most vulnerable periods of my life, Vedika. So I was bullied during my school days in my high school, severe level of bullying, because maybe my illness was considered as eccentricity, right? So I didn't fit in the typical model of what a normal school kid would be, right? I was aloof. I didn't make friends easily. I kept to myself. I was lost in my own thoughts, and this didn't fit in with the standard definition of what a normal person is, right? As we define it. Yeah, and that could have been a reason that I was bullied a lot at school, and there was even in college there were people who made fun of me, okay, and pulled my leg, sort of that kind of experience. So what was most hurtful was those periods where I was not equipped to deal with those kind of comments, or that kind of stigmatization. I wouldn't say it was directed at my mental illness, because I don't think anybody else realized that what I was. I myself didn't know what was happening to me. How would I expect the world to realize, my struggles? But to them, it might have been, this guy's a misfit. He's a good subject for ragging, right? I mean, that is a way youngsters. Maybe if I would have been in their position, I would have done the same. So no grudges now, looking back at the situation. So when you say what are the things which affected me, I would say one important aspect of what people say to you is the obvious stigmatization. Except for my early days of struggle, very honestly, Vedika, I am very grateful that I haven't faced stigma of that extent that we hear about. Yeah. Not from family, from relatives, my in-laws, friends, colleagues, nowhere. In fact, it is difficult for me to even recall one instance of somebody sort of belittling my capabilities, or calling me names, because although they know that I'm living with bipolar disorder, because I'm open about my condition in public life. So it's not that they aren't aware. Yeah. So that is one aspect. But sometimes in close family and in relationships, what one realizes is what is unsaid.
Yeah.
It is not what is said, but what is unsaid. So sometimes one looks, especially in a period of struggle, the person is looking for support, sort of compassion and empathy, and just somebody putting a hand on your back, okay, don't worry, we'll see this through. I'm with you. Those kind of gestures, or but again, no complaints. Yeah, I have learned to take these things in my stride. So I'm a person who looks at the brighter side of life. Okay? Because I've been blessed with so many helpful people in my journey. I would rather look at those aspects which have nurtured me rather than those kind. And that's going to, that sort of a mix is bound to be there in life, yeah, isn't it? You can't have a, perfection in every sphere of relationships or interactions. That is expecting the impossible.
No, I think, see, you've been able to take, that stigma and the criticism and the bullying aspect that comes with a mental illness, like in your stride. But for a lot of people, especially with bipolar disorder, which is extremely misunderstood, it can be very, very challenging, right? So could you just throw a little bit of light on, what are some of the stigma that actually exists around bipolar? Because we've all heard, they are very volatile, they are not reliable, they can suddenly become very aggressive. We've heard those things, but you would have come across it even now in the work that you're doing, when you're working with communities and people with lived experiences. Like, so what are some of the stigma, and how would you call that out?
Firstly, the generalization that happens, yeah, or one makes sweeping statements, right? Now there was the unfortunate suicide of last year of the celebrity. I don't want to get into those details, but you saw how media went overboard with what. So bipolar disorder is associated with substance abuse, and so what I call it is painting everybody with the same brush. Right? Yeah. So is everybody living with bipolar disorder into substance abuse or alcohol addiction or whatever? It isn't, right? Is everybody indisciplined or careless or reckless? No, right? But what happens, this kind of conversation that happens in public domain especially, naturally distorts the picture of how the illness manifests in a person, and it sort of negates the person's human experience. An illness is just part of me, right? I am not bipolar disorder, right? So it's just a part of my human experience, yeah? But because of how this is portrayed in in cinema, on television, on news channels, whenever such an event occurs, or in debates and so on and so forth, public imagination has those kind of perceptions, I would say, Vedika, unfortunately. Yeah. On the positive side, we are seeing a lot of people being vocal about their journeys. So, stories being shared, like I'm doing my sharing my story today, but we are seeing a lot of youngsters coming up and sharing their stories, and we are seeing that a lot of people being vocal on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and so on and so forth. So that also, sort of balances the equation to a bit, sort of it reduces the barriers in people understanding and relating to such people. Yeah, Ritika. So on one hand, you might have these kind of extreme distortions, and then this is taking it closer to connecting people with what the illness is about and how people actually experience it. Right. Talking a little bit more about stigma, as I would say, Vedika, there are 3 facets to stigma which I've written about in my book as well. I mean, in a broader sense. Yeah. So the one facet of stigma is what everybody would correlate with what you were just described. That this guy has got bipolar disorder, be scared of him, stay away from him, he's not dependable, he can't do anything worthwhile in life, that so on, right? Second, which is very equally damaging, is the internalizing of stigma.
Correct.
All these, thoughts that I have read in public domain, what has been said to me, what has not been said to me, but suggested in so many words, right? What have I sort of told myself over the years, and they have become hardwired beliefs in me. Yeah? So they become, some, burdens that I carry every day and stop me from living my life to my fullest of my potential, right? At every level. And the third part also, which can be equally damaging, is trivializing of mental illness.
Right.
Okay, so what do I mean by that? your illness has nothing to do with it. You're just acting lazy. A person who is severely depressed can't get out of bed, and you say this to it, this is the last thing they want to hear, right? At that point of time. So then it is not about making the illness sound big, but in fact reducing the illness to as if something which is being pretended to. It is not a symptom or an actual issue the person is facing, but it is a pretension. People are hiding behind excuses. That kind of trivialization.
Sorry, go ahead. So
please go ahead.
In terms of, what you said in terms of stigma and how we internalize the stigma, and also at the same time, the aspect of trivializing. Now that we're seeing more people sharing their stories, as you said, where do you think, the semantics comes into play? Because, for instance, there are a lot of people, perhaps it is their way of countering stigma, where there is this narrative, like, oh, my mental disorder has been a blessing to me, or it's my superpower. But, as someone, even as you going through it, I'm very sure that in your phases, especially of, major depression, you wouldn't look at it as, oh, this is a blessing and, it's a blessing in disguise. It makes me who I am. How do you think that plays a role in the way we start looking at it?
Very much so. Because what happens is sometimes people share articles about people living with bipolar disorder who are very gifted throughout history. All right. I mean, there's no harm in that, except what is the sort of learning that is trying to be implied, that my being diagnosed with bipolar disorder gives me these kind of special powers, right? And second thing, that it is a desirable condition, right? Yeah. That because I've got bipolar disorder, look, I can be a genius. Like Vincent van Gogh was rumored to be bipolar, living with bipolar disorder, and everybody knows what a genius of an artist he was, right? Do I say that, look, I have bipolar disorder, and this becomes my strength? I think that is again trivializing the condition, and it also trivializes the suffering with millions of people go through.
Correct.
I have reached this level of stability, and I am recovered to this level of calmness and functionality. That it would represent a fraction of people living with bipolar disorder at any given point of time who are in this position to say this, right? So even if I look at it from my selfish point of view, am I not disregarding the suffering of the community at large? Yeah. So I am absolutely against this kind of conversation and I believe that is also romanticizing mental illness, whichever mental illness it is. Yeah. Then look, I mean, you say, look, this came as a blessing and it transformed me. Fine, bipolar disorder has transformed me, but didn't come as a blessing. You lose somebody in your life, to death, or somebody, to an accident, and that was a pivotal point in your life. It made transform you. But you don't say that the death came as a blessing. You don't say that, right? Then how can you say this?
I think, also part of what you said is, in this whole quest of romanticizing somewhere, we really negated a lot of people's experiences. But also coming back to the whole aspect of semantics, right? You will hear people who will say things that, oh, when I was going through a depressive phase, I didn't end my life because I was more rational than that. So, where do you think, statements like that, or, that notion, how does that add to the problem in the narrative itself?
Immensely. Because especially for a person going through that phase, I mean, it would make that person feel more miserable. It would make that person feel that, look, there is a weakness in me, that I am not, I cannot take ownership of my challenges. There's something missing in me, right?
Right.
So totally, I mean, this should be discouraged. Totally with what you are saying, Vedika, right? Because it has to begin with empathy and end with empathy. There's no question about it. Yeah. And then whatever comes in the pathway. Unless we change our approach to an empathetic approach, for any person to relate to, even for a mental health professional for that matter, yeah, to relate to what a person is going through at that moment is very difficult. Unless the core approach is looking at the person with empathy and compassion, trying to understand the human being going through that gamut of emotions, yeah, and the turmoil.
I think, as you said, the empathy quotient is so important, because at the same time, you need to understand that not everyone's going to learn something out of it. And it's okay, if you don't find meaning in your pain, you don't have to. Sometimes it could be as simple as, I suffered and I don't think that was, something I deserved, or I shouldn't have gone through it. And that's okay. You don't have to find that, this taught me so much and it's made me who I am. Yes, it transforms you as a person, but finding or just constantly searching for that meaning can be a little, as you said, very romanticized approach towards looking at a mental illness.
Absolutely.
So how do you think your experiences sort of have shaped you in the way you started Bipolar India, and how are you taking that forward?
So firstly, and a very, very fine observation, by the way, Vedika. Yeah, right. That romanticizing of mental illness and saying that this came in as a blessing, or that itself is such a disruptive thought. I mean, one should reject it outright, even not consider it. Yeah. What it did for me is, firstly, it helped me evolve as a person. Remember, I told you about how I became a person who started introspecting more, looking more inward, because I realized more of the challenges were within. Relationships also can only be normalized, you can thrive in relationships if you are so well settled within yourself. Right? So I did a lot of introspection. This journey that I went through, which was at that time a troublesome one, it wasn't easy, let me say, yeah, because I was not well at that time either ways, but I dived into it wholeheartedly. It transformed me from one being just a bystander to one being to a compassionate human being.
Right.
So rather than making it more about my journey and my recovery, I became, more interested in and more empathetic and concerned about what the larger context was. Vedika, that was a massive transformation. Yeah, because one needs to evolve beyond the self also. You can't begin with my challenges, end with my transformation. But then what does it lead to? Does it evolve to something bigger for society? Right? Yeah.
Right.
So it, I would say it made me an observer. So initially an observer of my own problems, observing my own moods, my emotions, my thought distortions and where they were coming from, making sense of all that, right? Yeah. Once all that was in place, I didn't need to devote so much time, because that became an automatic process, right? I didn't have to really consciously get into that. So then it expanded, my universe expanded to the community around me. And whenever I used to, all my conversations on social media and blogging and all those, whenever people connected with me, and there was a lot of, distress expressed, people feeling, utterly hopeless and looking up to me, and all that was fine. But I said that, look, there is a need to communicate to these people as well, that recovery is possible in a majority of cases. That is what the inner voice told me, Vedika.
Right.
Yeah. And that with the help of a mentor of mine, Puneet Bhatnagar, he helped me articulate the vision for Bipolar India, right? In fact, let me give credit to him. And before I come to that aspect also, let me say one thing to you. When you talked about what were the sort of conversations people were making, directing towards me, and the stigma part, but it would be amiss of me if I didn't talk about all the positive inputs that were also coming in, right?
Right.
Something I'm totally blessed, I would say, in that sense. I mean, I mean it from my heart. I have had such phenomenal mentors at absolute the right junctures in my journey, where I was in doldrums and I couldn't see a path ahead with any clarity whatsoever. And here I had people to navigate my path for me, help me see the path for myself, create the vision for me. So it's not that always that you receive only negative inputs and things, right? There will always be at correspondingly. So it's a way, it's not never black and white, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there were these kind of people who were nurturing me. So one of these mentors was Puneet Bhatnagar, who saw my writing when I was blogging, and he said, "You have got much more talent than just going ahead with a blog." He encouraged me to take writing seriously, and then the book came out of that. And he came and met me one day, Vedika, and then the idea of building this community came up. Okay, so in May 2013, we launched Bipolar India. Even the domain name was conceptualized by him and was registered by him, right? Yeah. And in this process, I was also mentored by Jennifer Sertle. I call her my soul sister across oceans. She lives in Rochester, New York, and she was, coaching me all these, in this difficult period, trying to shape my personal path, of our organization's path, and so on and so forth. Right? And Dr. Amit Nagpal, who sort of made me an adept storyteller, and which helped me a lot in the work I'm doing, because it essentially is about storytelling. Communication is about storytelling. Otherwise, it's all data. If you're just sharing things which don't connect to the human heart, it's all data, right? It doesn't bring about change. So that's how. So Bipolar India, was initiated by Puneet Bhatnagar, and it began as a online portal, Vedika. And one thing led to another. There were a lot of conversations started happening on the portal, which was the most promising thing, because even in 2013, if you go back to, there wasn't so much of openness. There isn't openness even today, but it was even less at that time, right? So people began to share in the conversations on the website about their challenges, about somebody else living with this condition and how seeking help for it. And we created a community around these people. Yeah. And then became an important transition. We began our offline peer support meets. Yeah. Right. So that was 5 years back in Andheri, Mumbai. And every month we used to meet on a Sunday, an informal meet, just opening up, sharing of our thoughts in a safe space, not being judged, suggestions and help provided to the best of our ability. So it was a by us and for us community, right? And a lot of things happening during the course of this process. We conducted the World Bipolar Day conference at the national level. We are the first organization to do that since 2016, 17, repeatedly every year, right? And many other things. And now we are on the verge. In fact, we have already launched an initiative, and it is about to take off, which is very close to our vision, because we believe that recovery and rehabilitation should not stop at symptomatic relief from illness. Yeah, it should be assimilation in society, Vedika.
Very true.
So the organization named letswalktogether.org is about providing livelihoods to people with mental illness, and it's open to all communities. It's not restricted to the members of Bipolar India. So a person with any mental illness across India can join in on the portal and approach us, and we can try to seek placements for them for livelihoods. So that is how, dramatically the organization has evolved in these 8 years, and it has been a very, very fulfilling journey. And again, I would say, yeah, I feel I was so blessed that we have the support of some of the finest minds in India for this new organization. without any questions asked, they have lent support, right? Yeah. So we have the best of advisory board, our expert panel, and a few organizations have already collaborated with us also. So they are formally on board. So I can see it is very much like the universe conspiring. When the vision is about empowerment of people at large, everything starts falling into place.
And your entire journey has been really inspirational in terms of, your own story as well as, how that's molded you and the work that you do now. So just looking back, what would be, one thing that, you would say that, you know now, which you wish you had known earlier?
In fact, I would say several things, especially now, when you go into the stark partition between pre-diagnosis and post-diagnosis, yeah, the period I talked about, wilderness,
right?
My inability to seek help, to express myself. Now, how much of a difference would it have made if I was articulate? I would have gone to somebody and said, look, I'm in a mess, I need support, right? Yeah. Now I don't hesitate at all. Of course, I am a way different person from what I was back then. So yes, there is a powerful saying, "You are not alone," right, Vedika, when it comes to mental health. So that is so relevant in this context. There are people who will be empathetic, who will be supportive. It's just that we need to go out and seek out these right sort of people, and get there. So one thing I would like to say is, if anybody is listening in, they are in a struggle, seek support. Yeah, in your own inner circle, you will be having a person who might guide you to the right process. You might seek out a mental health professional or a mentor. It could be any intermediary to be of help to you.
I think, sometimes it's just so hard to express in words what you're going through. So, I mean, and over that, if you add that layer of, stigma or feeling judged or just not having enough safe spaces, it really makes it hard. And, as you said, I mean, when you were in school, or I think even up until recently, it's the internet which has given people that, like, a little bit of awareness on, okay, I can look up what I'm feeling or try and put a name to it. But I think that's what's been missing, is that whole aspect of, awareness. And then even if you have it, sometimes you just feel so alone. And, as you said, one of the main reasons we wanted to put out this space as stories of hope is that, to make people feel like less alone, that there is somebody who's been through it. This is their experience, and, some way you sort of relate to that. And, it's representation matters. So
very right. So these kind of stories help people connect, and that is much more relevant to them than hearing the same thing from their mental health practitioners. That's a factor, right? Because this is something which is a human to human bond which builds up, by sharing of stories. That is there. Yeah. A few more learnings from my life, I would say, which I would like to share, Vedika, is what my life has taught me is life can be so fickle. Yeah, you can be at the pinnacle of your journey, like I was way back in 2003. A successful entrepreneur. Just, we had the finest of reputations, and it all comes crashing down. Right? And to think, the key is to take these things in your stride. At that moment, it looks impossible. Yeah, because it's just like you're fallen off the cliff and there is no coming back up again. Right? So life can be fickle, and for me, very personal learning has been. It has been a very humbling experience.
right.
Right. So I have been in those pits, so I know, and I'm prepared to face those situations again. When I say I'm in a state of recovery, I don't know what life has in store for me. So be prepared for whatever life throws at you. Yeah. So that is one thing. My experience has made me a very grateful and appreciative human being. without the support and encouragement and the kind of comfort zone that I had with me, with my immediate family members and external mentors, I wouldn't be speaking to you here, I'm sure. It would have ended up in a slightly different way, I'm sure. So this has made me look at things with gratitude, right? Rather than become cynical about there are two ways we can turn out, right? The bitter experience can make you cynical about life and bitter about it, and or you can look at how you have come out of it with the help of other people, and this makes me appreciative and grateful. That although I've been there, look, there is so much to be thankful about to life. Life has been kind to me. So when many people sort of say that your journey is remarkable, all I say is that life has been very kind to me, Vedika. Yeah, and we can never forget that. There could have been so many things that could have still gone worse for me. They played out in my favor. Yeah. One incredible aspect which is rarely discussed in the domain of mental health and these kind of narratives, Vedika, which should be shared here, which is very powerful, is the ability of the human mind. Do we give it enough of acknowledgement? Do we give it enough of recognition and really realize how incredible the human mind is? I think at the heart of, my human mind has been the observer through this entire process, right? And it has evolved. So the brain and all that we talk about are those the biomedical components of my system, right? But look at how the human mind is, being created to sort of outlive all these kind of challenges. Yeah, so it's a phenomenal learning experience for me, and that gives me hope that how much. When I look back at any time in any point of time in my journey, say 10 days back, and then I realized, look, I have evolved so much, and then I realized that I have so far to go. Yeah, it's a realization that I have so far to go even now, right? Because there is so much learning happening. The mind is incredible. About our ability to transform, not to romanticize, as you said, Vedika, yeah. But whatever the form of challenges, it can be about the folding up of the enterprise, the marital strife, it can be this illness, about my asthma, whatever, But overcome these challenges cannot happen without the person, growing in some level, right? In terms of maturity, developing resilience, and more insights. Yeah? So, that is another thing that my journey has taught me. And one aspect, which is, again, I would say personal to me, my kind of intense suffering at that given point of time in the initial years made me go on a spiritual quest. And made me ask myself important questions like, who am I? What am I created for? And I would like to be, I'm not being immodest, but I think I have the answers of most of these now. Yeah? So that is a gift of the challenges that I have faced. So now I am deeply connected with my inner self, and that's why there is no more of searching happening, right? Although we keep evolving.
Right.
And so can you see this book,
yes.
Or is there a reflection?
No, I can.
Yeah, right. So in fact, this is the cover of my book. Yeah, Vedika. So as you see, this is how transformative my journey has been. Okay. So these are the footsteps on the cracked, parched earth, and then sort of the person being in a state of nirvana. That is what it is suggesting. Of course, I am not claiming to be in nirvana or anything close to that. So that is what it was about. And along the way, I have had so many opportunities to be called as a speaker at important events. And this gives me a sense of, a lot of pride that the lived experience is being acknowledged nowadays. That is another change that we are seeing. It's not only mental health professionals who speak on podiums to large audiences. It is the voices of communities also which are being represented. Yeah? And I would just like to share this, to end my story. My summing up of my life is beautiful.
I think if you had to give some advice to anybody who's watching this right now and is having a hard time with their mental health, like what would it be?
I think the easiest advice I can give them is that the mental health journey is not a linear journey, right? So within our community, many people look up at, many of our members look up to me. But then I said, look, if you had met me 10 years before this, I would have been a different person in great distress. I would have been seeking help from you, maybe, right? So what happens is when you are in struggle, you are engulfed by that immediate, set of circumstances, yeah, and there seems a lot of hopelessness at that time. Yeah? We need to learn, be able to see ourselves beyond that state of strife. Firstly, imagine ourselves being out of that, and then sort of create a pathway of getting there.
Right.
Yeah. So to that person, I would say in simple words that neither are our successes and our periods of extreme happiness and fulfillment permanent. Neither are our struggles permanent. Yeah. So these are what everybody experiences in life. But people with severe mental health conditions would sort of experience these in an exaggerated way. Right. That is the difference. So we need to sort of tell ourselves that this is a period of struggle, but I am not going to be here permanently. Yeah? With help from other people, my own determination and discipline, I'm going to be out of this at one point of time. Yeah.
I mean, thank you so much, for joining us and sharing all your insights. I'm sure your story of hope is going to inspire and instill hope in a lot of people and make them feel less alone in what they're going through. And for anybody who's watching this today, we just like to tell you that, if you're having a hard time with your mental health, just know that it gets better. There is help out there. There is somebody who cares. There is support available. So please reach out. You don't have to go through this alone. So till next time, please stay well and stay healthy. Thank you.